My graduation dinner was supposed to be simple. A few photos, a cheap restaurant downtown, my parents pretending we were a normal family. But 10 seconds after we sat down, everything snapped. My grandpa, the one person who'd ever looked at me with real pride, raised his glass and asked Lisa, "Are you using the $850,000 I set aside for your education?" The fork slipped from my aunt's hand. My parents went stiff. And me, I felt the room tilt because I'd never heard of any fund. Before I take you into what happened next, tell me, where are you watching from? And when you hear the rest, what would you have done if your future was stolen without you knowing? Growing up, I learned early that my family looked balanced from the outside, but never felt that way on the inside. My sister Megan was the bright one, the child my parents genuinely believed would make something of herself. They never said I wouldn't, they just never said I would. And in a family like mine, silence spoke louder than praise. By middle school, the pattern was clear. Megan got opportunities, I got responsibilities. When she struggled in math, my parents hired a tutor. When I struggled, they told me it was a good chance to build discipline. She got a used car on her 16th birthday. I got a planner and a speech about independence. I wasn't angry then, just confused and a little ashamed that needing help made me feel like a burden. College only magnified the distance between us. I worked part-time at a cafe near campus, wiping tables and memorizing regulars' orders while juggling classes and student loan paperwork. My clothes always smelled faintly like espresso, and my sleep schedule was whatever was left over after assignments and shifts. Whenever I hinted at needing support books rent anything, Mom would sigh, "Lisa, you know how tight things are." Dad would nod along like he was agreeing with some invisible rule book. They said the same sentence every time we wish we could do more. But somehow, the budget was never too tight for Megan. She got help with her apartment deposit, then help with her car maintenance, later support for a business idea that turned into a year-long project she never completed. Every time I tried to question the imbalance, I felt childish, petty, ungrateful. I told myself I was strong enough to carry my own weight. I believed that until the night everything unraveled. There were small moments beforehand, little flickers of truth that I didn't recognize. Like the afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house and found an envelope in the garage with my grandpa's name on it mixed with old holiday decorations. Before I could even read the return address, Mom rushed over, snatched it from my hands, and said, "Old paperwork. Don't worry about it." She shoved it into a drawer she normally kept locked. Her smile was tight, rehearsed. Something inside me whispered that she wasn't telling the truth, but I pushed the feeling down the way I always did. Grandpa, my dad's father, lived in another city. He was gentle, thoughtful, and never said things just to fill the silence. Every card he sent me growing up had the same handwritten line, "Keep going, I believe in you." I didn't know he'd been quietly planning for my future. I didn't know he'd trusted my parents to protect something meant for me. And on the night of my graduation dinner, I still didn't understand why Dad kept checking the door like he was waiting for something or someone to arrive. I had no idea my entire life was about to split open. In the weeks leading up to my graduation dinner, something in my family's rhythm started to shift, even if I couldn't name it yet. It appeared first in the way Mom watched me when she thought I wasn't looking, tight, nervous glances she tried to hide behind casual smiles. Dad grew more talkative than usual, asking questions about my job, my rent, my classes, as if gathering data for a test he didn't want me to know I was taking. At the time, I wrote it off as pride or midlife emotion. They were finally seeing me graduate. I thought maybe that softened something in them. Then, Megan showed up to family lunch one Sunday in a new SUV, the kind with leather seats and a dashboard that looked like a small spaceship. When I asked how she afforded it, she laughed and said her business investment had finally paid off. She didn't explain further, and Mom quickly changed the subject, complimenting her nails, her shoes, anything to keep me from circling back. I let it go, but the questions simmered in me like a slow boil. A few days later, I stopped by my parents' house to return a mixing bowl Mom insisted I had. While walking through the garage, I noticed a plastic bin pushed behind old camping gear. It wasn't the bin that caught my attention, but the envelope sitting on top. My grandpa's name was on it, printed clearly. I reached for it, but before I could turn it over, Mom appeared in the doorway, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move. She snatched the envelope and said it was misplaced paperwork before shoving it inside a cabinet. Her voice shook slightly. That was the first moment something inside me twisted hard enough to hurt. That night, I tried to study for finals, but my mind kept drifting back to the garage. What paperwork of Grandpa's would be sitting in a dusty bin at my parents' house? Why hide it from me? I replayed Mom's face in my memory, the flash of panic, the too quick explanation. A question formed in my mind, sharp and unwelcome. What were they hiding? The turning point came the night before graduation. I heard my parents arguing in the kitchen, their voices low, but tense enough to vibrate through the hallway. I wasn't trying to listen, but one sentence from my dad froze me in place. "We can't keep this quiet forever," he said. Mom hissed something back, something like, "She doesn't need to know." Megan needs stability. My stomach twisted. Who was she? What didn't I need to know? And why did Megan's stability always seem to cost me something? I didn't realize I was losing. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. My heart beat too loud in the stillness of my room. I thought about the envelopes, the unexplained expenses, the nervous glances. I thought about all the years I'd asked for help and been told there was nothing available. I wondered for the first time if the problem wasn't what they couldn't give me, but what they refused to. By morning, I felt hollow, but strangely clear. Something was wrong, and whatever it was, my parents were desperate to contain it. I told myself I'd stop asking questions at least until after graduation. I needed one peaceful day, one moment where I wasn't the daughter trying to navigate the space between gratitude and abandonment. But peace wasn't waiting for me. Something else was. Graduation morning should have felt hopeful, but I woke up with a heaviness I couldn't shake. Mom knocked on my door earlier than expected and asked if I was excited, her voice too bright, like someone forcing sunlight through a closed curtain. Dad hovered behind her, pretending to scroll through his phone even though the screen was off. Their strange tension settled into the hallway like fog. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on my ceremony, but every part of me felt alert, bracing for something I couldn't name. At the campus, Megan acted unusually cheerful, insisting on taking photos with me. She wrapped her arm around my shoulder and whispered, "Big day for you, sis." Her tone was sweet, but something about it felt wrong, like she was performing for an audience only she could see. When she stepped back, Mom immediately rushed to her side, adjusting her hair and telling her she looked stunning, despite it being my graduation. I felt the familiar sting in my chest, but brushed it away. For once, I wanted the day to be about achievement, not comparison. After the ceremony, my parents insisted we head straight to the restaurant. Dad kept checking his watch. Mom kept smoothing her blouse. Megan kept touching her phone like she was waiting for a message. I thought they were just hungry or impatient, but the truth was much darker. They weren't hurrying for me. They were hurrying because they were terrified of who else might show up. When we reached the restaurant, I understood why Dad had been watching the door. My grandpa sat at a table near the back, smiling when he saw me. I hadn't expected him. I didn't even know he knew the reservation time. Mom's face tightened the moment she spotted him. Megan froze mid-step. Dad let out a thin, nervous laugh. That was when the air changed, the kind of shift you feel in your bones before your mind can catch up. Grandpa hugged me tightly and told me how proud he was. Something in his voice warmed and steadied me, like I'd finally reached a place where I didn't have to prove anything. But the tension around us was unmistakable. Mom kept wringing her napkin. Megan whispered something to Dad. He shook his head sharply. My instincts sharpened. Whatever secret they'd been guarding was connected to Grandpa, and it was about to surface. During appetizers, Grandpa asked gentle questions about school and work. I answered honestly, grateful for the moment of normalcy. But when he asked about my student loans, Mom's fork paused midair. Megan's eyes widened. Dad cleared his throat. I felt the room tighten. Grandpa noticed too. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. That was when I felt something inside me collapse, not dramatically, but quietly, like a bridge losing a single crucial beam. I knew my family was hiding something. I knew it involved money, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't willing to absorb the confusion alone. So instead of shrinking back as I always had, I watched them. I studied every flicker of panic on my mother's face, every forced smile from my father, every restless twitch of Megan's fingers. I held my questions close. I didn't push, not yet. But the old version of me, the one who accepted explanations that never made sense, was gone. A new part of me had surfaced steadier and sharper, and I was ready to face whatever truth they were trying so desperately to bury. By the time the entrees arrived, the energy at the table felt nothing like a celebration. It felt like we were all sitting on a live wire. Mom barely touched her plate. Dad kept wiping his glasses even though they were clean. Megan scrolled through her phone with restless fingers, pretending to be bored, but stealing glances at Grandpa every few seconds. The air was thick, as if everyone but me already knew a storm was forming. Grandpa cut into his salmon slowly, his eyes drifting between my parents with a calmness that made the tension worse. He asked a few more soft questions about work, my future plans, the apartment I'd been trying to afford without help. I answered honestly, though my throat felt tight. I kept expecting Mom to interrupt Dad to make an excuse, Megan to throw in some comment to redirect things. But no one did. They were waiting, bracing, worrying about something I couldn't see. Then Grandpa wiped his hands with a napkin, straightened his back, and lifted his glass like he was giving a toast. His smile was warm, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at me, not at my parents, not at Megan, and said, "Lisa, sweetheart, I've been meaning to ask you something important." My chest tightened. Even Mom's breathing halted. Grandpa held his glass midway and finished the question that would split my life into before and after. "Are you using the $850,000 I set aside for your education?" The room silenced so quickly it felt like the air had been sucked out. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. Then I heard a loud metallic clatter, my aunt sitting across from me dropping her fork onto her plate. The sound echoed through the restaurant. Several tables turned to stare. Dad's smile froze like wet cement. Mom's face drained of all color, her fingers clenching around her napkin. Megan's phone slipped slightly in her grip. I swallowed hard. What fund I didn't recognize my own voice. It sounded distant, like someone speaking underwater. Grandpa's brows pinched together. Confusion. Then something else hurt. He set his glass down. "You don't know about it?" he asked softly, almost whispering. He turned his head toward my parents with a slow, deliberate movement. "You didn't tell her." Mom shook her head violently, as if denying reality itself. "Dad, she must have forgotten. We told her a long time ago." "You didn't," I said quietly. "You never said anything." Grandpa's expression hardened, the warmth in his eyes cooling into something sharp and focused. "Interesting," he said, voice deepening, "because the bank says someone used it." The words cracked across the table like thunder. Dad choked on his water. Mom's fingers trembled so violently her napkin slipped to the floor. Megan froze, her phone dimming in her hand. I stared at them, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Grandpa leaned forward. "The fund has been drawn from for months now. Large withdrawals, regular ones, and none of them came from you." Dad tried to find his voice. "Dad, you're misunderstanding." No, Grandpa snapped, and the entire restaurant fell silent again. His voice was low-controlled but furious. I checked twice. I called the bank. I asked for verification. I asked who accessed it. And the answer was not my granddaughter. Mom covered her mouth like she was about to faint. Grandpa turned to me, his jaw tight. "Lisa, sweetheart, did you ever authorize your parents to act on your behalf? Did you ever sign anything?" "No," I whispered. "Never." Megan shifted her chair, creaking. She finally spoke, her voice forced and light. "Grandpa, maybe the bank messed up. You know they're always making mistakes. Remember that time?" Grandpa cut her off with one look. Megan's mouth closed instantly. He turned his attention back to my parents, his eyes burning now. "Tell me the truth now." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Dad's shoulders sagged. Mom squeezed her eyes shut. Megan looked at them both, waiting for someone else to clean up a mess she clearly knew existed. Dad finally spoke, voice trembling. We had no choice." We needed help, and Megan's head snapped toward him. Dad, no, Dad said, shaking. He asked. We have to tell him. Grandpa's face hardened. Tell me what? Mom broke first. Tears spilled down her cheeks. We thought Lisa didn't need it. She always took care of herself. She worked. She managed. Megan was struggling, Dad. She needed support, and you weren't around to see that. I wasn't around because I trusted you, Grandpa said quietly. I trusted you to protect what was hers. Megan slammed her hand on the table. Why does it matter? It's still family money. We used it for family things. My stomach twisted. What things? Silence. Then Dad answered. Down payment on Megan's condo, her car, some of her business expenses, and other things. Groceries, bills, emergencies. Emergencies, I repeated. You mean spa packages? Furniture trips she took? Mom sobbed harder, but not from remorse, more from being exposed. Grandpa's voice shook with restrained anger. You stole from your own daughter. You stole from me. And you lied. Megan tried again. Grandpa, stop. I'm your granddaughter, too. Don't act like I don't matter. Grandpa turned toward her with a coldness I had never seen. You matter, but not more than your sister, and not at the expense of her future. Dad reached out a hand toward Grandpa. We planned to pay it back. Eventually. No, Grandpa said. You planned to hide it forever. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping hard against the floor. The entire restaurant watched. Mom whispered, Please don't do anything drastic. Grandpa looked at me instead. Lisa, you're coming with me tomorrow morning. We're going to the bank together. And then we're going to see my attorney. Mom gasped. No, Dad, please. Grandpa pointed at her with shaking fury. You had years to think about consequences. Now you'll face them. Dad sank into his chair, shoulders caving. Megan's eyes darted between us, panic rising. This isn't fair. I needed that help. Why couldn't she just work like she always does? She's used to it. The truth cut deeper than any lie. I wasn't angry the way I expected. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I just sat there feeling something inside me settle into a cold, steady place. A place that finally understood the shape of betrayal. Grandpa rested a gentle hand on my shoulder. You deserved a future, and they stole it from you. But I will fix this. Mom sobbed into her hands. Dad stared at his empty plate. Megan glared at me like I'd ruined her life by simply being the victim. But for the first time, I didn't shrink. I looked straight at each of them and said the only thing I could manage, I won't let you take anything else from me. Grandpa squeezed my shoulder. You won't have to. And just like that, the facade of our family shattered piece by piece under the soft restaurant lights. The next morning, I met Grandpa outside the bank. He looked tired, older somehow, but steadier than anyone I'd ever known. Inside, the manager confirmed everything, the withdrawals, the signatures, the pattern of access that pointed directly to my parents. Grandpa requested the accounts frozen immediately. He asked for printed statements, then calmly scheduled a meeting with his attorney for that afternoon. There was no yelling, no dramatic threats, just a firm, quiet insistence on accountability. At the attorney's office, I learned the full extent of it. My parents had drained the fund almost completely, using it for Megan's condo, Megan's car, and months of expenses that had nothing to do with me. The attorney walked me through the next steps, restitution documentation, and a new fund created under my name alone with strict oversight so no one could touch it again. That evening, Grandpa sat with me in my small apartment. He apologized not for their choices but for trusting the wrong people. I told him he didn't owe me an apology. The betrayal wasn't his. For the first time in years, I felt the ground under me steady. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth was finally mine. In the weeks that followed, my parents tried calling, apologizing, explaining, rewriting the story in every way they could. I didn't argue. I simply stepped back and let distance do the work truth had already started. Grandpa's new fund gave me stability, but his honesty gave me something bigger: permission to protect myself. If any part of my story hits home, tell me where you're watching from. And after hearing all this, what would you have done in my place?